Israel claims control of all Lebanon south of the Litani River.
The best thing would be that all the PLO will be out of Lebanon, totally out of Lebanon. Back to Syria, back to Jordan, back to Egypt.
Almost all the refugees are Lebanese, and they tell horrifying stories of how their hometowns and villages have been heavily shelled and bombed by the Israelis in their efforts to clear the south of Palestinians.
One old man said to me bitterly that the British were to blame for his present catastrophe. They had established the Jews in Palestine.
The Israelis bomb and shell the villages the Palestinians pass through. And now Lebanese families who've lived here for centuries are moving out in a hurry.
They blame the Israelis principally as the source of their misery, but they also blame the Palestinians. Why don't the Palestinians go back and live in Palestine and leave Lebanon in peace? One of them said despairingly. A plague on both their houses is indeed their attitude.
This is an artillery post of the Lebanese Arab Army, the leftist side of the army when it split during the Civil War. Last night, this was bombed by the Israelis and the artillery was put out of action. All yesterday, the guns here were being used to shell the Israelis as they came across their border and started moving up into southern Lebanon. That's about 12 kilometers away. And then this morning, about 5 minutes ago, Israeli planes bombed the road just up from here.
The Israeli bomber destroyed the Lebanese gun with pinpoint accuracy. This seems to be the way they're consolidating their positions today, by knocking out points of resistance sometimes several miles beyond the 6-mile-wide security corridor they are establishing. And this means their targets are often in the midst of civilian areas. The Israelis say they will hold the border area until the Lebanese can guarantee it won't be used by Palestinian fighters. Lebanon's own army is in some chaos, and the Syrians are not likely to give that sort of guarantee. And with this border country so ideal for the guerrilla warfare of the Palestinians, it looks as if the Israelis may be uncomfortably here for some time. Jeffrey Archer, News at 10 in the Lebanon.
Hello.
We would like, very much like, that the PLO will understand once and for all they will not operate from South Lebanon. And when I say South Lebanon, is even further north. We won't go further than what we've reached up to now, but we do hope that people will understand that the real uprooting of the PLO from Lebanon will probably bring peace and quiet, and therefore the Israeli troops back to Israel.
Do you think you've really damaged the guerrillas in this operation?
Well, I don't call them guerrillas. Guerrillas is too much. But with that, where do you come from? Are you England?
Yes.
Well, BBC?
ITN.
ITN,
When you say...
Well, no, I asked you a question. Have you really damaged them?
Of course we've damaged them. Of course we've done.
When you say they should go further north, Mr. Weissman, what do you mean, actually? I mean, you're speaking beyond...
The best thing would be that all the PLO will be out of Lebanon. Totally out of Lebanon. Back to Syria, back to Jordan, back to Egypt. So whether we could... Ahlan sahlan. مرحبا كيف الحال؟
Hello.
كيف حالك؟
Mr. the President.
دكتور بن ليان
أهلا.
عيد عمار برمنا.
يا شباب خليه يسمع والله. بعدوا يا خي بعدوا يا اخوان.
Hello. The refugees are arriving in a city which cannot provide adequate homes and services for its own population and cannot hope to cope with the newcomers. Almost all the refugees are Lebanese, and they tell horrifying stories of how their hometowns and villages have been heavily shelled and bombed by the Israelis in their efforts to clear the south of Palestinians. Many refugees are finding shelter in the shattered heart of Beirut, whose buildings are still unrepaired after the civil war. These concrete shells provide a roof over the refugees' heads, but little in the way of sanitary or other facilities. Attempts to rebuild the city centre, which have been hampered by economic problems, may now be halted altogether by the establishment of a refugee settlement here. In other parts of the city, shooting could be heard last night as militia tried to keep refugees out of apartment blocks which are already partially occupied. The influx into Beirut of what will probably amount to 100,000 refugees from the south can only be a highly dangerous influence on this still very volatile city. With much of the local industry destroyed in the civil war, there's very high unemployment here, and the arrival of so many homeless, workless people seems most likely to cause serious civil disorder. Although the Israelis may have planned to keep their land forces within a roughly 6-mile-wide corridor along the border, they are now devastating many towns and villages for a further 6 miles at least. As the Palestinians continue their steady retreat, the Israelis bomb and shell the villages the Palestinians pass through. From this tiny hamlet, 4 miles east of the port of Tyre, people listen to the attacks on the next village just over the hill. Daily, the war's been coming closer to them, and now Lebanese families who've lived here for centuries are moving out in a hurry. They will become just one more group amongst the 100,000 refugees already on the move north. The Israeli objective of stopping the Palestinians being an effective fighting force has not so far been achieved. The Palestinians are in their element in this guerrilla country and can go on harassing the Israelis as long as Syria continues to allow fresh supplies through. Jeffrey Archer, ITN, in South Lebanon. Israel claims control of all Lebanon south of the Litani River. From high points inland, Israeli guns shelled the bridge which carries the main coast road over the Litani. The target was apparently not the bridge itself, but the Palestinian positions around it. On the road just north of the river, Palestinian soldiers could be seen guarding the small encampments they've made in the orange groves and banana plantations which line the road. Although Israel claims control here, the road south to Tyre was still this morning in Palestinian hands. Not many of them left here, but a presence nonetheless. In Tyre itself, the Palestinian defenders of the town were relaxing after another night of bombing and shelling by the Israelis. Israel has said it does not intend to try to take Tyre, but if Israeli forces are really to control Lebanon south of the Litani, they will probably have to. Shortly after we filmed here, this part of the town came under a heavy air attack. About 3,000 people are still living in Tyre, trying their best to carry on their normal lives in spite of the nightly attacks in the area. Most of the casualties in the town were caused by earlier bomb attacks on the port area.
This is the remotest spot overlooking the Litani River in southern Lebanon. For 5 miles on approaching, we had seen no one. And on the ancient castle here, only a single slogan showed that the Israelis had occupied the place. Suddenly, we were watching the first United Nations troops to arrive in this area and become the most cut-off UN group in southern Lebanon. The men, just 40 of them from Iran, are armed with standard NATO-issue rifles. They may only be used in self-defense. The problems these men will face are as immense as the landscape. The great natural barrier of the Litani River, which separates Israelis from Palestinians, is here most breathtakingly demonstrated. Now the Litani is in flood, but in summer armed guerrillas could easily wade across and disappear into the folds of the mountains. For this reason, the UN will concentrate on watching the hill ridges opposite for signs of anyone moving down. Virtually impossible on a moonless night.
That's the route down to the river.
None of the UN's Middle East force have the sort of experience they'll need here. And now, since one of their colleagues has been killed by a mine, they will avoid using the dirt roads, and that will further hamper their communications. The real test of the UN's ability to hold the guerrillas and their weapons on the other side of the river will lie not at the main bridges, but with small groups of men at remote spots like this. Derek Taylor, News at 10, Southern Lebanon.
Just north of the old biblical city of Sidon, where a fast-flowing mountain stream meets the sea, some of the refugees from the fighting in southern Lebanon have found a temporary home. There is, of course, no pipe water. The women wash their clothes and vegetables in the stream. There is, of course, no pipe water in the camp. They shouted at us angrily to go away, and one woman threatened to throw water over the camera. They're bitter because they've been driven from their hilltop villages among the orange groves just north of the Israeli border by a quarrel and a war which is not theirs. They blame the Israelis principally as the source of their misery, but they also blame the Palestinians. Why don't the Palestinians go back and live in Palestine and leave Lebanon in peace? One of them said despairingly. A plague on both their houses is indeed their attitude. Nobody knows exactly how many refugees there are. Figures range between 150 and 200,000 in the whole country. This camp has 3,000 people in it, 10 to a tent approximately. It's difficult to get a precise figure because many people have gone to stay with friends or relatives or simply occupied empty flats and derelict buildings in Beirut and elsewhere. The schools in Sidon have been closed down and the buildings turned into emergency camps, and Boy Scouts and schoolgirls enrolled as relief workers. The local authorities send a daily supply of water, doled out carefully. and every day a lorry drives into the camp with a load of tinned food, beef, milk and tea, and sacks of rice. One old man said to me bitterly that the British were to blame for his present catastrophe. They had established the Jews in Palestine. But a young woman of 20, whose personal tragedy was much greater, showed no signs of bitterness. Perhaps her emotions had been exhausted. Zainab was having a baby in Sidon when the fighting started. Her home village of Markaba is 1 kilometer from the Israeli border. As soon as she could leave hospital, she rushed home to be told the shattering news. Her husband, the village baker, was dead, and her 3 children of 6, 4 and 2 were missing. She hopes they've been taken in by someone, but where? She doesn't know. In time, she hopes they will be found. But when? She doesn't know. Meanwhile, she clings to her new child, asleep in the tent behind her.
The Syrians' onslaught on the Christians in Beirut last week is not being forgiven or forgotten. At the Hotel Dieu Hospital, Beirut's second largest, the nursing sisters handled 29 dead and nearly 200 injured during the Syrian bombardment. The Syrians' declared aim was to cripple the Christians' private armies, but their indiscriminate bombardment of civilian targets like this hospital did nothing to weaken the Christians' military strength or to improve the Syrians' reputation.
Although the fighting here in Beirut has all but stopped, apart from occasional sniping, there's no let-up in the tension here. Because with the Israelis lined up behind the Christians and the Russians lined up behind the Syrians, the situation is becoming difficult to defuse.
And the 2 leaders of the main Christian militias, Pierre Gemayel and Kamil Shumun, seem in no mood for compromise. They both want the Syrians out of the Lebanon and refuse to tame their armed men according to Syrian instructions. Even their acceptance of the Lebanese president's authority is qualified.
No, not accepting an authority if the authority is wrong. I accept the authority when authority is right and doing the right thing. Nobody can accept an authority for the sake of accepting the authority of somebody.
With such intransigence, the Lebanese president is in an impossible position. And at the moment, the country is quite simply ungovernable. Jeffrey Archer, ITN in Beirut.
I'm taking good...
The arrival of 500 men of the new Lebanese army in the south of Lebanon seems to be creating another problem for the United Nations to solve. The Lebanese government is trying to re-establish its authority in the south of the country, where Christian militias control most of the area the Israelis invaded in March. And the Christians have fired warning shells at the Lebanese army to keep it out of their area. The Christians have Israeli backing, and the Lebanese are calling for United Nations pressure on the Israelis to force the Christians to let the Lebanese army in. The UN are mandated to keep armed men out of the south. The Palestinians have cooperated with UNIFIL, as the force is called, and have made little attempt to infiltrate back towards the Israeli border. But the blue-helmeted soldiers still need their white-painted armored cars to protect themselves against the wild and unpredictable Christian militias. They number several hundred men. Some are former soldiers from the old Lebanese army, which disintegrated in the civil war. Others are phalangist gunmen. Nearly all their guns and ammunition come from Israel, and there's the promise of almost unlimited support in any further fighting. One of their leaders is Major Sami Shidiak of the old Lebanese army. He now has a hotline to the Israeli army HQ on the other side of the border. He refuses to accept the authority of the new Lebanese army advancing towards him, because since it was trained by Syria, he reckons its sympathies are anti-Christian and even pro-Palestinian. And he won't let the UN into his area because he's worried they would take away his guns. It's official United Nations policy to help the Lebanese government reassert its authority over the whole country. But the UN will find it difficult to convince the Christians and the Israelis that the new Lebanese army is not an extension of Syrian influence in the south of Lebanon, and therefore a threat to their existence.